welcome to Summer Reboot Camp. Can you guys quickly just introduce yourselves, who you are, where you're from, what you do? You get it. I'm so professional.
You should start.
I'm starting with Ashley because she's
Okay.
on top, and then you're down there, and then you're over there.
Okay.
So my name is Ashley Carlisle. I am a big law refugee. I'm a former Kirkland and Goodwin corporate attorney, and now I am the CMO at HyperDraft. If you haven't heard of us, we're a trusted technology partner for law firms and legal departments, and we basically provide AI-powered document and workflow automation solutions. Oh, and I'm here in LA, so if I'm not awake yet or you hear random background noise, it's because I am reporting live from my apartment and I can't control
God
what
bless.
happens outside.
It's got to be very early there. I appreciate
Yeah,
you waking up
jeez.
before regular time.
I feel
Joe,
like-
you're up.
Yeah.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law, and I have a podcast called Thinking Like a Lawyer. And yeah, I am coming to you from not LA. I'm on the East Coast, so I'm very much awake.
Hello. My name's Jared Correia, and I've basically been a law firm consultant for the last 15 years or so. I run a company called Red Cave Law Firm Consulting. And I guess since we're announcing where we are, I'm in northern Massachusetts in my kitchen. Also very awake this morning.
So, hi guys. Welcome to Answering Legal's 2023 Law Firm Summer Reboot Camp. My name is Nick Werker. I'm the marketing director at Answering Legal. I'm coming to you from Long Island, New York, otherwise known as Long Guy Land,
Yes.
if you pronounce it that way. I'll be hosting the majority of our conversations here at camp this week. So this is our second year holding this event. It's great to be back with everybody. For those who don't know, this camp will be providing law firm leaders with expert advice on how to reinvent their practice for the second half of 2023 and hopefully beyond. Hopefully this won't all be outdated by the time it's released. So today's portion of camp will be focused on legal tech related topics, and naturally today we're going to be starting things off by talking about AI and how it will impact the future of law.
Not at all. Thanks for coming, everyone. No.
Yeah, right? I'm just going to pose this question. You can all jump on top of each other. Whoever's the most awake can answer first. But are we at the point where we can no longer avoid AI technology in law firms?
We are at that point. I think it is useful to do some distinguishing on AI, that there's a difference between more like extractive AI tech and generative AI, which is more your chat GPT hype cycle. One side of that equation is a lot more ingrained in the legal universe already, and you definitely can't ignore that. But you also probably shouldn't be ignoring the generative stuff and what's happening with it, if for no other reason than to avoid getting sanctioned.
Yeah, to add on to that, I think this has been a really cool time for legal tech companies because a lot of us have had AI in our products for years, and people were not interested. In fact, when we first started, our name was HyperDraft AI, and we ended up changing it because lawyers would be like, ooh, I don't want to talk about AI, or how do I know your AI is not going to do X, Y, and Z? Think of crazy theories, they would say them. So it's a really interesting time because really you shouldn't have ignored AI before. It's been probably in products you're using or in legal research you're using. Now it's just hit a tipping point where people are either being force-fed it or it's in the discourse. And so if you choose to ignore it, you're probably still going to kind of have it interact with you in your legal practice. So it's best just to kind of embrace where we are and how it's developing.
Yeah, I mean, lawyers have always looked to avoid the next big thing in culture or technology or whatever. Unsuccessfully, I might add. So this kind of reminds me of lawyers I talk to where they're like, hey, is that cloud going to be a thing? And I'm like, you're emailing me on a Gmail account, so you're kind of in the cloud already. There's AI stuff going on, and like Ashley mentioned, I think this is an important point, and a lot of softwares you're using already. Microsoft's huge into AI. If you're writing an email on Microsoft and it's completing your sentence for you, it's using AI to do that. AI has been in legal research tools for forever, I feel like, at this point. And now, actually, you guys re-scrambling to get your name changed back to HyperDraft AI? Or are you our moment is here?
We have both. So if people want to call us either, that works. But yeah, it is just crazy how it accelerated the trend. I think a lot of us are really excited, but also, I don't know, confused and contemplative at the same time of this is great. Let's hope it stays. Let's hope the interest continues.
Well, yeah, I think it's great as an assistive tool for lawyers. Like, yeah, maybe AI is going to ruin the world at some point and destroy humanity. I could totally see that happening, but not right now.
I can't
Yeah.
wait for AI to be useful enough to like and I don't know how to describe this really, but I'm really bad at organizing my own work. And so and I can see how this would be so useful for lawyers is like, I need a certain document about something that I filed, like for a trademark, say, for my company. I don't know what I named that document, and I want to be able to ask, like, my virtual assistant to go find that document for me, and also, like, anything related to it, because I did that trademark too long ago, and you know what I'm saying? So I'm curious, based on what you've seen, how is AI currently being used in law firms, and where can it possibly go? Like, what's the next implication that law firms should be using on a daily basis?
I want a robot butler, if I may say. Like,
I do too.
Rosie from the Jetsons. That's what I want. Somebody like clean my house and like take my kids places. That would be amazing. But until Elon Musk lays that out, like, so where is it being used in legal right now? Like that use case you gave, like find me a document set. I mean, I can't think of a software off the top of my head that does that right now, but I bet there is one. Ashley, does your tool do that?
So not in the way he said it, but basically we can pull from the data within a client's, DMS or wherever they have their document management system.
Yeah.
But it's more so pops up in the drafting process.
Yeah. So
But yours is more generally like universally applicable, but
Yes.
similar to.
So there are use cases like that, like, find me documentation, build me a document. There's AI tools right now for document assembly. That's a use case. I talked about the legal research stuff, like there's brief analysis tools. There's like this brief analysis work going on right now in legal research. They're using AI for some of that. There are lawyers that are building workflows and task management through AI. Like, I don't know if people know Notion, which is a workflow tool. That's got a really nice AI interface that they've developed. They're using some of ChatGPT, some of their own home-baked stuff. I know lawyers who are writing letters to clients using AI. I know lawyers who are writing briefs using AI. Check your sites, by the way. Sure,
Yes.
but I'm sure there's been like 50 articles on Above the Law about how these generative AIs miscite cases or make cases up. And I think the other thing that people want to look out for is there's these AI tools that are going to be like task managers effectively. So with ChatGPT, for example, you could say, hey, design me a marketing plan for a 10-year-old estate planning law firm in Southern California. But then there's tools out there like AutoGPT, which just like threads things back into ChatGPT, which could actually like not only build a marketing plan for you, but execute it, which is really cool. So that's one of the reasons why you want to stay on top of this stuff. But like, yeah, those are like, I don't know, 4 or 5 use cases that lawyers should be on top of, as far as I'm concerned, that you can do right now, by the way. Those are all existing tools.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Jared, for covering all of our answers. A couple things I would add,
I'm going to take a nap.
which, some of our friends, there's so many cool legal tech companies that are emerging. I know that AI has been trying to invade kind of the transcription space, and in some states it is legal, in some
Right.
states it's not, and there's a lot of cool things happening on that end. I know a lot of litigators are very excited about that. Similarly, there's just a lot of predictive analysis for cases and like jury selection and stuff that is kind of in its infancy that I think will be really exciting, kind of like the e-discovery stuff was when it was in its infancy. So really, it's going to invade kind of everything. It's just basically how adoption's going to go and also how usable it is. ChatGPT, a part of the reason why it blew up so much is the UX UI was finally perfected at a zero cost kind of gain to people. And I think especially in legal tech, we've been fighting that battle of making it as easy as possible for lawyers really to get addicted. And that was just a great lesson to kind of reinforce kind of that mission we've been working towards.
By the way, Nick, I need an answering legal mug so I can use it during these events we do. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. So
I'm gonna mail that to you like today.
excellent.
I have
Thank you, sir.
way too many answering legal mugs.
Good.
Anybody
Send
who
me
wants
some
an
of yours.
answering legal mug, email me at nick@answeringlegal.com. I will personally mail you an answering legal mug. I'll write some nonsense and I'll put it in as a note.
No, you
And
should
can
have an AI do all that stuff for you. I thought we talked about this.
Yeah, written by ChatGPT at the bottom.
If they could go to the post office for me, I would love that. I hate
Soon
going to
enough.
the post office.
Soon enough, my friend.
I want to ask you, what should lawyers be doing right now to make sure that their practice is prepared for the future of law and new advancements in AI technology? Because right now you said like it's in its infancy, right? Like you can ask a question and get an answer prepared for you. But where are we headed? Like, what's the next step with AI?
I feel like I've been talking too much. But
I know, me too. I feel like
All
we've
right.
steamrolled.
all right, can I say what I think one thing that's
I
going
don't
to
think
happen
any of you are
is
talking too much.
here's
Yeah.
one thing I think that's going to happen, which I think attorneys listening to this are going to be like, that's crazy. That'll never happen. But it's going to happen pretty soon. So like I've been thinking about this, and I'm probably going to write some articles on this, but like from an ethics standpoint, right? Like you've got AI that is like building documents for you. You got AI that is potentially answering questions for people with you. Like if you had an AI assisted chatbot, like it could probably answer legal questions for you. So at what point does that become a person that's working for you versus the software that you're vetting? And I think this is a really super interesting thing for me. So if like I can get a Roomba for my house, right? And it can map out my floor plan and vacuum the floors for me. Like why couldn't I input AI into a robot and have that AI become a legal assistant for my office? Like how far away are we from that? Like I bet Joe is like maybe farther away than I think, but like we got like robot dogs running around in Boston from Boston Dynamics delivering packages and stuff like that. Like that's actually happening. I can go down to downtown and see like a dog like run by me with a UPS package or whatever. But like how like you could easily do that, I think, for a legal assistant in a law firm as well. Like
I mean, I certainly think that what we're going to see
I
is a
piqued
lot
your
of
interest, Joe. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot of tasks of legal assistants taken up, but I don't see all the legal assistant taken up. You know, it will lead to a cutback in staff at law firms, I think. But I mean, we're already seeing that, right? Over the course, even in my career, the number of staff members at a big law firm has been drastically cut back because so much can be automated. This is just going to be more of that. I think there's a lot of tasks that executive assistants do now that can be automated, but at the end of the day, someone has to be kind of running that, checking that, making sure everything's fine. So I think it's going to be a cut back in staffing, but not a complete elimination of staffing.
So you could see a world in which there are like robot paralegals, but a paralegal administrator who's running that group.
Yeah, sort of. I think I would say that in a world where my firm would have in litigation, we would have had like 50 paralegals. I see a world in which there's like 15, and then a bunch of AI running things.
Okay. I can be
I
down
would
with
see
that.
a cutback. I'm also seeing some firms talk about how they're changing just the job description. So, for example, we were talking to one client last week that was like, now I really need, which sounds bizarre, but I think this is going to happen more and more. I really need my paralegal to also be like a graphic designer. I think there's going to be other skills that are kind of pushed into that role because now that there's tools that can help them do things quicker, they now have these new needs they didn't realize they had before. They have more time to do them. So I think really we're going to see a little bit of a reduction and also just like an amalgamation of different people trying different things with their support roles. And I'm curious to see kind of what prevails as kind of what's going to be the new norm by the time the next generation comes and starts their own firms.
Yeah, I think people are really nervous that this is going to cut down on workforce. And I'll speak from my personal experience because I don't really want to speak for anybody else. I use ChatGPT a lot to do like marketing things. It writes ad copy for me. It writes email subject so that like if I want to A/B test a campaign, I say, hey, this is the email that I'm sending. Can you write me 10 subject lines? And it usually writes more than 10 subject lines. But I'm not like firing my staff because I have ChatGPT on the side. It's really just enabling me and my staff to do more, if that makes sense to anybody. So I think you don't really necessarily have to cut down on your workforce. I don't even know that I would say like if I would go from 50 paralegals to 15, it's just maybe that they could become more efficient and maybe a little more healthy in the meantime. I don't know how many people have joined, but for anyone joining us late, we are currently hosting a discussion on how AI will impact the future of law. I'm joined by Ashley Carlisle, Jared Correia, and Joe Patrice. Jared's in his kitchen. Hi, Jared.
Hello. Being very aggressive
guys,
about AI. Just quickly, the other thing I think that's interesting that Joe is talking about too is like, so is there somebody who has to manage the AI and at what level, right? Like, if I'm telling my kids, go be prompt engineers for AI. Like, that's your job. You just tell AI what to do. And if you can do that successfully, like, that's going to be a whole career unto itself. It's becoming a career right now. So I think what's really interesting is like telling the system what to do, how to operate is basically a new role that's going to be filled out in law firms as well. And some lawyers, I think, are getting really successful at doing this as well.
I think it's just like when Westlaw and Lexis came in and kind of the evolution of law librarians changed.
Yeah.
And as you guys know, there's a great community of just really brilliant people that have done a lot of cool things in that space. And I think that'll continue to change where maybe they're doing more prompt engineering, or even just things we can't even think of right now. Like you said, robot paralegals, them helping code those. I don't know.
Robot paralegals. When that happens, people are going to be like, Jared was right again. Sorry, I thought Josh. Go ahead.
Yeah, I hope for your sake that Conan does something on it so you and I are happy about it.
Yes,
but
let's hope.
Yeah, I think it's just kind of like with every technological, I guess, advance we've had in modern history, like people just pivot. So I think everyone's kind of confused right now because we just don't know where the pivot's heading, and I think that's totally fine. But I think if anything has been solidified in the last decade is that we're in a technological age. So whether it be prompt engineering or coding or, even data analytics, just having more technological literacy and trying to make that a part of your habit stack is something that everyone, including lawyers, should be doing.
Yeah, what's interesting is Boolean logic is really hard, I think. That's why natural language search is so popular. So, I don't remember all the Boolean connectors, and should I be having an S here or not? So, what I'm seeing some lawyers do is they're using ChatGPT and other generative AI tools to be like, hey, I want to find this on Lexis. Craft me, the best search topic for that, the right Boolean connectors, and then I'm just going to cut and paste it and put it in. And that's a really interesting use case, which is pretty simple, that I think any attorney could do tomorrow and get some use out of AI.
I do think there's going to be a generational issue here where the old people, quote unquote, old people are going to actually thrive for a little bit. Because when it comes to prompt engineering, I feel like I, as a more senior lawyer, am way ahead of some of the younger folks because I lived in a world without natural language search. I do remember all the Boolean stuff. I also remember the idea of going at problems from different directions. That's something that I also teach at West Point, and some of my cadets will have this issue where you tell them to find something, they'll type it into Google, and when it doesn't give them the answer they want, they just kind of type something else into Google, and they just kind of keep hitting that, and I'm like, well, the library has it in a physical form. Or you could also go to this different database, not everything on JSTOR is searchable through Google, and that process of understanding that maybe one source doesn't have everything and you can attack it in different directions is going to be the sort of thing that becomes those good prompt engineers, the people who start thinking a little outside the box on how the system works. And that's a skill set that I think I'm starting to feel like there was a generation who are currently 18 to 25, 30 that missed out on a lot because natural language had come in.
And younger, I'll tell my kids, will be trying to do something, and they'll try one way to do it, and then they'll be like, well, I guess we can't do that. And I'm like, there's alternate ways to do things. Try a different solution, test it out. I think this is the difference between watching The Simpsons and SpongeBob. I'm just going to throw it out there.
No, there you go.
I watched both. I'm not the, so I don't take insult to that.
I have one point to add on to that because I think that is so interesting. I also think that kind of, I don't know how you describe it, of just kind of their neural pathways are more linear than maybe how we were brought up, the younger generation. I think it's also why so many of them already are just confused by the legal industry, so technologically behind, and whether firms or organizations have products or not, they're just going to start using their own, which is something that we've been dealing with some clients, is shadow IT of people within bigger organizations just using products on their own, which also can be bad if you don't have the proper safeguards. So I think that's a really important point to think about just generationally. I think you're right that kind of maybe the senior attorneys are more in a better position right now, but they also need to think about kind of their junior attorneys and the training and how that's going to be different at this time.
Yeah, the shadow IT thing is huge in legal. And I think that's a great point because the AI stuff is going to be a lot of what people are just utilizing on their own. Like, there's going to be a bunch of like 40, 50-year-old partners, like, or associate attorneys, senior associates. Let's face it, waiting for like the 80-year-old partners to die. We're like, now we can't use AI. I don't understand it. I don't want to do it. And then they're just going to start using AI and stuff on their own. And it's going to be relatively unregulated because the IT staff may not be aware that they're doing it. They may be doing it on their own devices. Maybe they don't have great data security policies. So that should be pretty interesting. So once those people eventually climb up to those management seats, it's going to be interesting to see how quickly that AI gets adopted. Maybe it'll get adopted really quickly. But in the interim, there's this crazy like interregnum period where you got half the firm doing one thing, half the firm doing the other thing.
I want to ask, because I think everything that I keep hearing about what law firms are using ChatGPT for is like, oh, this spit out a wrong, case, or it made up its own case research. What tasks should lawyers actually be using AI to like get things done?
So I am talking to a lot of firms that are using AI to do law firm management tasks as a starting point. So the whole thing. Let me just note quickly on the case thing. So the way these AI systems work, they are built to provide an answer for people. And when they can't provide an answer or when they're challenged, they get really upset. I don't know if you've seen like the Bing discourse where someone was trying to communicate with Bing AI search and it was getting really pissed off because the person was like trying to ask it to do things it couldn't do. And so if you're like, hey, I need a brief, the system's going to be like, okay, there should be a case that goes right here. Well, I don't have that case in my database, so I'm just going to make up a case. That's easy to solve, like Joe talked about. Just like do your own research and be like, oh, is this actually a case before submitting it to the court? Like, that's not hard, but it'll help get you like 90% of the way there. So I think for use cases, it's the same thing with like business management. I have a consulting client I'm working with right now who loves like the generative AI stuff. And she's like, okay, let's build an intake system for my law firm. I'm going to tell ChatGPT, like, build me my intake system. Now, that's something I used to do with clients, but then we get that intake system and it's like, well, I would tweak this and I wouldn't do that and I'd make this change here. And the truth is that these systems are not relying on infinite data sets. They have relatively small data sets, as it were, to work on. They don't have the personal experience. They're not funny. They don't have those human qualities. So it's really hard to get the same thing out of an AI that you would get out of a person. So I find that for the business management stuff, at least, lawyers can and should be using it for that. Let's build a workflow for X, Y, or Z. But then they probably need to bring their own experience to bear or talk to somebody who can help them refine that so it actually works in the real world. But that's just one use case I've seen, like people doing business management tasks or setting up workflows in AI. And just quickly, the last thing I say is, like, in terms of the prompt stuff, like, what's cool about the AI is that you can really set the stage for it effectively if you write the right prompt. So you can say, for example, I'm starting a law firm in Southern Florida, and we focus on employment law. That's different than saying, I'm a 20-year practitioner in Northern California, and we do estate planning. Now do this for me. Like, that's really helpful to set it up that way because it'll take that experience into account.
I always tell ChatGPT the name of the company that I work for. I'm like, oh, I work at Answering Legal. It's a legal answering service for attorneys. This is what I need. This is the background. So I do understand that prompt engineering is super important. I understand what you're saying, that you should do your own research alongside of ChatGPT, right? But at what point can you do your own case research first, right? And then sort of feed that prompt back into ChatGPT so that it has resources, or like any generative AI, so that it knows what you want to sort of, I don't know, lean on or cite as your sort of case on the back end?
Yeah, like find more like this kind of a sort of thing. You can definitely do that. The risk that I think is, and it's hard, but easy conceptually. Obviously, it takes a lot of hard work from people who are very good at tech stuff to do. But the real key is to explain. It's going around that I can't remember who originally coined it, but the phrase that generative AI is mansplaining as a service is accurate. I mean, it is something that is just going to try to tell you something, whether or not they know anything about it or not, and they are very, very confident about it. What needs to happen is you need to build guardrails that tell it, you got to be more confident if you're going to make this answer. Something that says, like the example Jared had, where it's like write a brief. It says a case should come here. I don't have that case. I'll make one up. You need to build something into the interface that draws on that engine that puts in that space. I was unable to find something that crossed my 90% confidence level that it is a real case. I couldn't find it in Lexis and Westlaw. So instead of making something up, I'm spitting out that I don't have it. Those kinds of checks are going to be when you cross over that line where you can actually kind of rely on it more.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, which I think both Joe and Jared touched on earlier, is like there's so many forms of AI. So I think your initial question was how lawyers can use AI today. So obviously with ChatGPT and these LLMs, people are thinking more generative AI. And like Jared said, I think most of our clients so far have been using it kind of for business cases as opposed to purely legal substantive work, just because they find that maybe a senior lawyer would know kind of how to correct the first draft from ChatGPT, but a more junior lawyer might have more difficulty in remembering all the different things they have to check for, just like drafting a document in general in a law firm. So putting those guardrails on, I think, has led more people to say, I'll use ChatGPT in an administrative task management business capacity, which can be really great. You don't really have to spend a lot of time prompt engineering if you just want to start kind of today on that. You can kind of incrementally build, and then using legal products with embedded AI, whether it be deep learning, natural language processing, predictive analysis, tools like ours, case text, what have you, for research, document creation, things like that. And I think that's kind of going to be the continuing trend. Now that people start liking ChatGPT, they're like, well, here are the limitations. I don't know if I want to put this much time into it. What's already out there and what works for me? And I think we've all been wanting people to do that for a long time. So it's very exciting that's finally happening.
It's funny, I was watching Interstellar the other day, which is a great Christopher Nolan movie. And so Matthew McConaughey's on a spaceship and he's working with this robot. And the robot keeps making bad jokes, and he's telling the robot, like, okay, let's turn your humor down to 70%, 60%, 50%. So Joe's point about, like, the confidence of AI is interesting because you could tweak those settings within the system, but right now every system is, like, 100% confident, effectively. But, like, this whole case research thing, like, Ashley and Joe just basically talked about this, like case text, for example. Ashley, your tool, like, how do you fix the problem where the system is making up cases? Well, you use that technology within a system that has a database of all those cases. So as a lawyer, like, buy the right technology. Don't be cheap for once.
So don't use ChatGPT to do your case research. Use a tool like Ashley's.
Hey,
well, and to add on to that, when you're looking at vendors, us included or whoever else, ask where the data is, where it's coming from. If it is solely your data, if it is source, how that works. That's going to be just kind of a continuing thing in our space in regards to privacy, confidentiality, all of that. And it's good for firms to just start asking those questions so they can get kind of the purview of what's happening.
We just got a great question from Casey. Can you speak to the ethics of sourcing data for AI? You've talked about the benefits of using AI, but have not addressed where the data comes from.
It's different for different systems, right? They're all training on different data. And it's really hard to know because they're not necessarily releasing that. And I was talking with somebody about this the other day as well. How much of that data is copyrighted, right? Like, I've written stuff that's out there online. Let's say somebody's making like a business management query and some AI tool is using my stuff. Like, I don't know. How many people are using Midjourney to design stuff and you got like Disney images in there? Like, I think that's all yet to be worked out. Like, the IP stuff is like a new frontier right now. So I think these systems probably need to be more open about the data sets they're using, but there's no like governmental controls on that yet, so there's no necessary reason for them to do that. So
Yeah, I think that's true. As AI generally, how it's been trained is going to be a huge problem. I think one of the advantages in the legal sector is that the big firms are training on a lot of their own data, years and years of writing contracts and years of approved language that they can rely on. There's also the fact that cases are public, so to the extent you're doing case law, that's government stuff. If you're using Edgar filings, that's all public. So in some ways, that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be also problems. Like Jared was talking about, there are use cases that could present problems, but one of the advantages of law, mercifully, is that a lot of what we deal with is publicly available data. So it's not going to be nearly as fraught as some firms will be.
Yes, that is very true. And just to add on, I know there are a litany of cases and more by the day about this copyright issue. And I think that's what's prevented these large LLMs from releasing user guides. Like if you look, all these they don't have user guides that show like kind of how it's trained specifically, kind of the pitfalls. Typically that is normal. Like Microsoft has a ton of those, right? Typically. But because people release these models so early on before they can really know kind of the utility and the specs of it, I think they're probably going to have to wait for that kind of wave of litigation to quiet a little bit, and then hopefully we will get more intel in that. And I think a lot of people, including myself, are really excited to see kind of what actually is happening, because a lot of people have educated guesses and, they give us little snippets, but those are good questions to just keep asking as this keeps developing.
And the problem kind of comes, like Joe was talking about, when it's mixed data. So if you're a law firm, like Joe described, and you could guarantee that you were only using your law firm data and like data from a Lexus subscription that you own. Like that's a totally different thing. But how do you render that data effectively in association with an AI, right? Like Notion, for example, I talked about, they're a really good task management platform. They're pulling in ChatGPT resources, and ChatGPT resources change on stuff like, I don't know, what is it trained on? I have no idea. Like that hasn't been officially made public yet. So I think,
and it's changing.
And it changes.
From 3.5 to 4.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah, right. Every time they do a new version, they change what the learning model is. It's a whole thing. Like it's going to take a while to untangle
They did
this.
put out what.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Joe.
They did put out what they trained on, like that big list that was published in the Post, which was really interesting because they did not train at all on Above the Law, but did on a personal blog I had several years ago. So somehow my random personal blog that never had more than 1,000 readers got way more into the DNA of that than Above the Law. It's really weird.
That's interesting. Look at you, man. You're running ChatGPT. I don't know, like, and I guess the other thing for me is, like, I don't know, like, unless there's, like, a regulation in place, like, I don't know that I trust that these companies are going to release all their sources. Maybe that's just a conspiracy theorist in me. I don't know.
Well, I think until, like I said, there's so much litigation that's just started, and it will continue on all the IP issues, privacy, confidentiality, especially as large organizations like banks and law firms, like, how do you prevent one firm's data from accidentally being, in the model of another firm's? We get these questions from clients all the time, and I'm so glad they're asked because our engineers, no one's done it before. So you really have to think it through and be diligent about it. And, sometimes maybe push timelines to make sure you're doing it ethically and responsibly, because taking the easy way out and getting the easy buck, probably is to the detriment to privacy and confidentiality concerns.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'd say on this, which is I think important for all these things, is like, there's with technology like this and other technologies previously, there's always going to be some level of cultural lag. So you're never going to have like black and white answers, really, because by the time you have regulation on something like this, or the government acts, there's going to be a whole new version of this technology that they haven't accounted for yet. And that's the same thing with legal ethics rules, too. So if you're looking for, like, a direct answer on this stuff, let me just tell you it's never coming, and you're probably going to have to extrapolate a little bit.
You should ask ChatGPT for the answer.
It will confidently provide an answer, I'm sure.
Bad joke. Matthew asked, are there any companies creating a tool that lets law firms train their own LLM?
So I don't know of any companies, but there are definitely development shops. I know of many law firms that are attempting. I will tell you it is a very boring and very long process, but there are definitely like a litany of development shops that are helping law firms do that. And actually, we've had law firms come to us very oddly and be like, we want to use you, but we're also developing this. Like, how do we come up with this relationship? And I think, as tech becomes more of a mainstay in the kind of the business stack of law firms, which it should have been for a long time, we're going to have more firms that develop their own stuff and use legal products at the same time. I'm sure Jared has seen kind of some experimentation in this over time, and it will only continue, even at like, from solo to big. Because right now it's kind of just been the big law firms that are doing it, but we're seeing it kind of dip down more into the mid-size and smaller as well.
I was talking to a solo firm the other day that has built its own software, or his own software because it's one guy, right? And he's now implementing AI components into that software. And he's just running it on his systems. So that is absolutely happening. And then I guess the question becomes like, how do you combine that, like Asher was just talking about, with off-the-shelf providers? That's gonna be tough to do, frankly. I mean, it's worthwhile, but it's not gonna be easy.
Yeah, I think the main thing we find is, lawyers are very ambitious and we think we can do everything, which, to be honest, I think lawyers are pretty impressive, so they can do most things, but they're also really impatient. So we find that many people start these projects, spend a lot of money, and then like abandon them midway through and then are like, come fix our problems. Jared, I'm sure you've had this too.
No,
like,
never. No.
Hey, we told you so. We can fix your problem, but like, you're basically doing to us what your clients do to you. So let's have this reflection moment.
Yeah, but this is why it's important to stay on top of this stuff too, because like companies are always coming out with new features, and they're now going to start coming out with AI features pretty aggressively. They already are.
And I think, actually I might have read this in something Joe did a while back. A lot of companies have had AI features but have called them something else because lawyers did not want to kind of understand that AI was their product. So a lot of things are like, oh, this new AI development probably is just a new name for something that's existed. So it's not scary. You're probably using it. It's probably helped you. But it is just so interesting how this all is kind of turned upside down.
Yeah, it's kind of like it depends on whether AI is hot at the moment and if people are willing to talk about it.
Right.
Because I've also seen like companies be like, we do this with AI, and I'm like, this is absolutely not AI.
I almost feel like in the legal, I was just going to say, I almost feel like in the legal sector, this is a weird time because AI is hot in the world and legal is interested. I feel like legal has been counter-cyclical on the hype cycle. When AI is popular in the past, they don't want it and have to have it called something else because they don't want to be, like, they're the hipsters of the tech world. They have to be counter whatever is popular.
I heard about AI before it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, for whatever reason, ChatGPT just resonated with everybody, lawyers included, which is crazy to me because I think Joe's right. Like, I would have thought that like lawyers would have gone on to this like 3 or 4 years later, and for whatever reason, like maybe it's just so easy to use, maybe it's so interesting to people, like they just love it. I get lawyers talk to me about AI every day.
I want to ask this because I want to piggyback on what we were just talking about. Because generative AI might be popular right now, but I do think that there are a lot of lawyers who they're hesitant to even get started with it, and maybe they've done like what restaurant should I go to tonight with something like ChatGPT. But what are some of the misconceptions that lawyers have about other AI technologies that you would like to clear up?
I would say in regards to misconceptions, there's a lot. Just from conversations I had at the end of last week alone, I would say the main two are that a lot of lawyers, because they see so much press and discourse and people are like in water cooler conversation, because they have so much of that in their mind, they think that AI is farther along than it is. We've made amazing developments and it shows a lot of intrigue and promise. So I don't want people to think it's like not in a really good state. But we definitely are not, I think Jared has said before, it's not in prime time. We are at the beginning. It is still figuring some stuff out. You definitely have to check it. It's something you need to start kind of, like I said, working on your technical literacy. But we're not totally there. And I think when we have that conversation with our customers or our friends, people are relieved, but then they're also like, well, why should I start learning about it now? And I think the reason you start learning about it now is because clients are not as busy as lawyers. Clients are already putting the stuff in their business. Clients are talking about it, and you would rather have some baseline of what's going on and how it can be positive or negative for your firm and your practice and how you'd have to shift your business, if at all, before a client comes to you and is like, I want you to use this tool, or we're doing this. You don't want to be left to like have a 11th hour decision making on something that does require a bit of like a technological or learning curve for you and your firm. Another misconception is, and I think I alluded to this earlier, that AI, like generative AI, is AI. In fact, when I put engineers on our kind of onboarding calls, they get so annoyed that like lawyers just think all AI is generative AI, because computer science people and engineers are like, wait, but generative AI is like this small thing. That's like saying tax law is all of corporate law. So right now there is like this chasm between like tech and law, and a lot of lawyers are just saying generative AI because it's what they know, but in reality that's just one little subsect of like a whole umbrella. So also realizing that maybe it's going to take a minute for kind of the public to realize all the different parts and how it's being used in society now. And lastly is that it's going to replace humans. I know Jared said that perhaps we'll have robot assistants, paralegals, what have you, but there's so much to the human element of law, and I think that there's a lot of these articles written by non-lawyers that kind of suggest, or studies that are done by non-lawyers that kind of bypass the fact that there is a lot of counseling and hand-holding done, and as more things are automated, that will become more of the practice. And so I don't think people should be scared. I think people should just be focusing on things that computers and automation can't do. And I think they're probably just not thinking enough of what they do on a day-to-day basis. They're probably already doing that and doing it well, but kind of doubling down in those areas.
I liken it to, I was having a conversation with my mother-in-law over the weekend about this specifically. I was like, I got a lot of work to do this week. I'm hosting this live event, and I don't know how it came up. Maybe we were talking about the fact that we were going to talk about AI day one. And she told me, she was a school teacher, so I never knew this about her. Retired kindergarten teacher. And she used to work for, I want to say it was Izod. And she was in charge of like data analysis, but had to type each individual formula that she needed in a spreadsheet into each individual cell. She said it was mind-numbingly bad. And I liken that to like where we're at now with Google Sheets, right? I can hit like Control A and then type 3 things, and I have this whole map built out of my data. I don't have to sit there and type one thing at a time anymore. Like my process has just sped up a lot in the last 20 years. So I think that people are a little afraid of where we're going to go with AI, but it's just going to assist you in getting tasks done that used to take you a million years and you hated. I want to ask this because Richard asked, can you give me your top 3 practical, specific uses or ChatGPT searches that I should be using in my smaller practice? And he says he does litigation and PI.
Can I do something else real quick? So,
You can do what you want.
I'll get to this because I have some thoughts. First of all, I totally believe the AI doomsday scenario is happening. Hopefully I'll be dead before it happens. But so this whole point of like misconceptions, I think one of the things that is happening right now with lawyers, they're entirely focused on how do I use AI in the back office? Like how do I research better or produce documents more effectively? But like, I think the better question is like, how are your clients using AI, which is something that Ashley alluded to. So like, if I'm a business attorney and I work to help people manage contracts, right? Like, wouldn't I be like deathly afraid, or I should be deathly afraid that my business clients are going to be like, why do I need my lawyer to draft this clause for me? I want this certain things to happen, so I'm going to say, ChatGPT, write this clause in my contract like a lawyer would, or draft me an agreement that my lawyer would normally draft. My lawyer's got 10 years experience. He focuses on these practice areas. Like, why wouldn't you do that? So I was having a really interesting conversation with an attorney who's starting a practice, and her view was like, look, I'm in a community with a lot of old attorneys, and I'm going to be a younger attorney coming up, and then I'm going to be having younger clients because I'm going to be appealing to those people. And I'm not necessarily competing with these old attorneys. They're not going to go to the people who are my ostensibly competitors because they're operating in a different way. So for me, it's like me versus AI. Like, how do I market against AI, and how do I make it compelling to a client to say, hey, I know you could go do this for free on GPT or Google Bard, but I want you to pay me like $500 for this. It's a really tough sell to make. So yeah, I did want to do like the use cases and stuff, but I don't know if anybody else wanted to comment on that. I'll just pause for a second. Doesn't look like it. Okay, right. Okay, so use cases. So I do a presentation on AI that I've done for about 20 bar associations right now. And I mentioned some of these before, but let me just list these out. So like we cover like 6 use cases for attorneys that they can use. One is like research prompts. Okay, you want to do research more effectively, go to a generative AI system, and we focus on generative AI, so this is kind of like, because that's what everybody's talking about, this is kind of like the focus of this presentation. So research prompts, build them out in the generative AI, use them in the systems you already have. Business operations, talked about that. You need workflows, you need to figure out how to manage something internally, you need a policies and procedures manual, ask AI to draft it for you. Content marketing is another big one that we haven't talked about. So you want to start marketing yourself on the web. Really easy way to build out that content is to use ChatGPT to help you get a blog post started or whatever, and then you edit it and finish it later. Correspondence, I talked about this one, writing letters to clients. Like, let's say you have a client who you've advised in one direction, but they don't agree with that strategy and they want to go counter to that. You could have a generative AI service build out a response for you, and then you tweak it so that intake workflow, I talked about that one. And then the other thing is like software management, right? If you're using a popular software, let's say, and you want to figure out how to use it better, or you want to know how to do something in that software, and I know people like don't love knowledge bases a lot of the time, or maybe they don't want to go on Reddit and figure out how to use something, you can also ask an AI, hey, how do I do this process in my software that I use every day? Like, those are 6 use cases off the top of my head that you could use.
I was going to put in one, but then it appeared in the chat, basically. Matthew makes the point that you can train it, you can train the chat GPT to act like the judge that you have, for instance, like pump in a bunch of that judge's opinions in the same kind of practice area and be like, all right, what would the judge say about these facts? Is a thing that you can do to help maybe inform how you write and the kinds of language you want to be citing, because it's going to notice things like, this judge always cites these 2 cases in this area. This judge really is hung up on this quote. Like, these are things and insights you can potentially get from that. Another thing you could potentially do is program it off of a bunch of publicly available briefs that your opponent has written to see what they might be saying, given the facts, if you know who your adversary's attorneys are already. Those kinds of exercises are just, and I want to just tag onto this, the idea that ChatGPT and all of these engines are going to replace lawyers. I don't think that's true, partially because they're going to create new things for lawyers to do. That's a task that you wouldn't really send a first year necessarily off to do, because it could take forever and be difficult, whatever. But now it won't be. And so you'll be able to bill for that. So the good news is the bills can still be churned. You're still going to be able to bill people a bunch of money that they don't really need to spend, because it's going to give you these new options.
Well, the other thing that's interesting too is like, yeah, you can use all those AI tools to do those things, but then you could combine it with some of these other softwares that exist right now. Like Trellis, for example, is a California research company. You can figure out, like, for a particular motion, how does a judge rule on that? So you can combine those 2 data sets and maybe make a better decision about what you're doing. So I think the point is like the combination of AI and existing legal tools, whether they're working together in an integrated format or not, is really powerful.
I want to ask this because I do think that this might be one of those misconceptions. I think Brad asked this. I lost it in the chat. But do we know what the people at companies like OpenAI see in terms of what we input and what the computer outputs? I want to maintain confidentiality.
I think that's a big thing of concern, and I think there have been, maybe Joe has more of, from what I
do
can
they
tell,
see?
there's been
Everything.
varying answers to that. So I would assume they're going to see everything. I don't have, evidence to support that, but I would assume that because they're really using us to train their model. through all the prompt engineering as well. It's a part of the training. There's a lot of different factors from what we can assume.
Yeah, I would assume everything. And I would assume that's just not an AI thing. I would assume every company you're feeding data into is looking at everything or can look at everything, right?
Well, unless you've negotiated with them. We do not collect client data, but that's because of how our software is set up. But we let people know at the beginning, because of that, we're a little bit more expensive, but you get what you pay for. So you're more secure in that regard.
And then there are some zero knowledge databases that will, as part of their process, just not look at some of your stuff. And then Matthew put in the terms of service for OpenAI, which is the place where you want to look for this, of course. But in terms of practicality, so the attorneys who I think are using these tools, but also being circumspect about how to do it, they're not typing in their clients' real names or anything like that. I know a lot of lawyers who will be like, hey, here's a scenario I have. They'll be like, this is John Doe or this is Jane Doe, and they'll be changing addresses, which I think is probably what you're going to want to be doing until there's some clarity on that.
And also instructing your people at your firm to do it too, kind of the shadow IT.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that's the thing. You could have and you could have the best intentions too, right? So you could have a really strict data policy. You could tell everybody not to mess around with AI, and you got one associate attorney who's just out of law school and it's like, you know what? I'm gonna put my clients' names in here, whatever. That's almost impossible to control. And it's the same. Somebody could take a paper out of your law firm and give it to somebody. It's impossible to manage that. So you got to be really careful.
So before we end, I want to ask each of you, do you have any predictions for where we might be by the end of the year? Or any thoughts on what lawyers might want to start preparing for next?
End of the year, we're not going to 2040. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm kind of on the fence. I've seen trends happen in legal and then go away. I'm not even sure that lawyers are going to be as interested in AI as they are right now at the end of the year. That doesn't change the fact that their softwares are going to continue to use it. They're going to be exposed to it on a regular basis. They may just not want to talk about it as much. I mean, the development's going to go on, and there's going to be an appetite for it. But yeah, I'm not sure if this is just something that is a fad that's going to go away or not. I mean, as far as conversations in the legal industry, let me be specific. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, at least on our team, we've been discussing that we think some of the hype will die down, but in a weird way, this has kind of been a blinking billboard for the industry on legal tech generally. So we're kind of preparing for hype to die down, but adoption to kind of incrementally increase. Because like you guys have alluded to, lawyers are slow movers. So maybe this is just kind of the thing that gets them thinking about it, and then years down the road or months down the road, they're going to start looking at vendors and trying to figure out how to implement it at a higher rate. In regards to technologically what we can expect, I think there's also this interesting phenomenon where a lot of the products that have been in the news are in beta. So I think actually next year and the following year, we're actually going to start seeing demo videos of things that are built. I think that's another misconception I didn't hit on is obviously some of these larger LLMs like ChatGPT people can start playing with now, but a lot are still being built right now, and it's just kind of the beta and the explanation to set the stage for kind of the first user base. So I think that's kind of what we need to brace for in the next couple of years is people's experiences with those, and hopefully they're positive and people want to keep doing it. But if people push things out too quickly and they're not positive, people in our industry are going to have to do a lot of damage control. So we're hoping that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think the deadline for the end of the year, and I think it's already come up in the chat and all, although I also feel like this is probably a more tech-savvy, self-selecting crowd. So where I think it's going to be towards the end of this year is that people are going to start doing the shift from look at this cool thing that it does to the security and safety concerns issues. Like, how do I get all of the benefits of this without it taking client data and doing bad things with it? How am I going to have this and train it to write in my style and not have it be something where other firms are stealing my intellectual brain nuggets? How all of those things happen, is going to be the concern down the stretch here. I think we've already gotten to the point where everyone's excited about it. Now it's going to be the part where lawyers naturally are risk averse.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of did a cop out. I didn't really talk about anything technology wise. I'm just like, are people going to still be talking about AI at the end of the year? I guess I would say that there are going to be a lot of tools that you use in your everyday life as a lawyer or a business owner that's going to get you more exposure to AI. And so, I don't know, maybe people will be using AI 10% more of the time by the end of the year, because it's going to be in Microsoft, it's going to be in Google, it's going to be in all these tools that people are using. So I guess if I had a prediction, that would probably be a reasonably small one.
Oh, one more thing, because was a part of your question what they should do, or was it just? I think it might have been.
If it was, you should.
Okay, what lawyers should do to prepare. I think many people have said this, but I will say it again. I think lawyers are busy and we're focused on our clients' needs more than our own, which is why legal tech is such an uphill battle, is because, we don't put on our own oxygen mask first. But I think, if anything, all of this hype has kind of solidified that you need someone in your organization. And people have varying approaches. Some people pick junior associates that are tech savvy, assistants, people who are dedicated knowledge management people, to really be researching this and keeping tabs. And I think a lot of our clients now are doing like kind of quarterly updates on what's happening in the industry, or monthly updates, just to try to make sure that they do understand what's happening, because they're also getting a lot of questions from their clients. So I think if you don't already have that infrastructure in place, that's something very easy and quick that you could start today. You don't have to be a tech expert to kind of, read a lot of the great stuff that's out there. Both Jared and Joe write a lot of content that is very helpful, and a lot of other people in legal do the same. So just having someone keep tabs on that while you're buried in client work is really prudent at this time.
You know what's interesting is I have found over the last few years that, it used to be in law firms, if there was a new role that came up or a new thing that needed to be solved, the law firm would be like, hey, let's find a lawyer and throw a lawyer at the problem. Like, here's Tina from the IP department. She's going to be our AI person from now on. Lawyers do that all the time. But what I'm encouraged by is that lawyers are now law firms are now starting to hire individuals with those skill sets to perform those tasks. Like, they hire marketing people, they hire salespeople, they hire technical people. So I think that law firms, to Ashley's point, are probably going to start hiring people who are IT experts and have them do the IT stuff rather than throwing lawyers at the problem, which they've traditionally done. And I'd like to see that happen.
So if anyone wants to follow your work and connect with your company further, where do you recommend that they go? And I'm starting with Ashley.
So if you want to learn more about HyperDraft and join our waitlist, you can go to our website, hyperdraft.ai. Also, we're most active on LinkedIn, so that's HyperDraft Inc. And if you have any questions about AI, document workflow automation, really legal tech generally, I'm always available via email, so that's ashley@hyperdraft.ai.
Yeah, you can read bunches of stuff about legal tech, as well as just lawyers being bad people, at Above the Law, so that's abovethelaw.com. I have a podcast, Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm on a legal tech journalist roundtable every Friday that Bob Ambrogi hosts, so that's always a fun place to get some legal tech news. I'm Joe at abovethelaw.com is the email, and I have the Twitters and Blue Skies and those sorts of things. I'm either Joseph Patrice or Joe Patrice at all those.
How do I follow Joe and Ashley? Both tremendous. If you Google my name, you'll find stuff on me. Go to my website, redcavelegal.com, for more information about the consulting stuff. And I actually have a podcast, too, where we talk maybe about a third of legal stuff. It's called the Legal Toolkit. Maybe a quarter. It's called the Legal Toolkit on Legal Talk Network. So Joe's there, too.
Awesome. Well, this is all the time we have for this discussion. I'd like to thank Ashley, Jared, and Joe for joining me today.